The Philadelphia experiment was a conspiracy theory where a ship, the USS Eldridge, was alleged to have been cloaked and rendered invisible not just to radar but to the human eye. The experiment was said to have been carried out by the US Navy at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, in late October 1943. The alleged secret test, which is thought to be a hoax and has been denied by the US Navy, first came to prominence in 1955 in letters penned by an unknown source and sent to UFO author Morris K. Jessup. Skeptics point to discrepancies in the story that do not match up with the vessel in question, as well as the fact that the tale appears to defy the laws of physics. In 1955, Jessup, author of a book called The Case for the UFO, received 2 letters from a man called Carlos Miguel Allende, who also went by the name Carl M. Allen. Allende/Allen claimed to have witnessed the experiment. He said the Eldridge was not only made invisible but teleported from Philadelphia to around 100 miles away in New York. He also maintained that the ship encountered aliens in another dimension, and a number of sailors on board died after becoming fused to the destroyer's hull. One account included a claim that one crew member ended up on a deck level below the one where he began and had his hand embedded in the structure of the ship. Despite his championing UFOs in his book, Jessup was said to have considered Allende to be a crackpot. However, in 1957, the author was contacted by the Office of Naval Research, ONR, in Washington, D.C., where officials had received a paperback copy of The Case for the UFO in a manila envelope marked Happy Easter. The book had a number of annotations in the margins, written in 3 different shades of pink ink, appearing to detail a correspondence among 3 individuals, only one of whom was given a name, Jemmy. The ONR labelled the other 2 as Mr. A and Mr. B. The different hands mentioned different types of aliens and referred to the Philadelphia experiment. As a result of this, the ONR funded the printing of 100 copies of the book, with the annotations included. Jessup was later found dead in his car in a suspected suicide in Dade County, Florida, in April 1959. The next time the Philadelphia experiment gained mass public notoriety was in 1979, when author Charles Berlitz wrote a best-selling book about the mysterious Bermuda Triangle, and his co-author William L. Moore penned a book called The Philadelphia Experiment Project Invisibility, ostensibly a factual account of the incident. It linked the Philadelphia experiment with possibly lost research on unified field theories by Albert Einstein. Later versions of the story also linked the experiment to time travel and to World War II German scientists aiming to find anti-gravity. They were allegedly led by SS Obergruppenführer Hans Kammler, who was in charge of the Reich's V-2 rocket and jet programs towards the end of World War II. Ultimately, however, the veracity of the Philadelphia experiment has never been established and is officially denied. It was also dismissed by crew members of the USS Eldridge. Before his death in 2011, Captain William Van Allen, captain of the USS Eldridge from 1943 to 45, who had a distinguished service record in World War II, said, "I was on it almost every day and went on every trip it ever took, and it never went to Philadelphia." And Ed Tempany, a crew member of the USS Eldridge, added, "If there was any scuttlebutt, nautical slang for gossip, I would have heard it, and there was no scuttlebutt and top secret anythings on our ship." As such, irrefutable evidence for teleportation on the scale claimed in the case has never been presented. In order to see whether teleportation was in any way possible, I consulted Dr. Stephen Olmshenk, Associate Professor, Department of Physics and Astronomy at Denison University, Ohio. Dr. Olmshenk said he does not believe any person has ever teleported. He added, "Quantum teleportation is a real phenomenon, and that has been demonstrated by experiments on small scales, like pairs of trapped atoms, and has important applications in quantum information and quantum computing. Quantum teleportation uses the features of quantum physics to teleport information stored in quantum mechanical systems. However, all of these experiments required incredibly isolated and controlled systems. For example, the trapped atoms I referenced earlier were trapped in an ultra-high vacuum chamber, and interactions with air would have prohibited the experiment from working." More generally, he pointed to an answer he gave to futurism and science fiction website Gizmodo on the question, could teleporting ever work? He wrote, "Such a feat would be an enormous challenge and would look very different than the typical sci-fi implementation, quantum teleportation, using the features of quantum physics to teleport information stored in quantum mechanical systems, is a real phenomenon that has been demonstrated by experiments on small scales, like pairs of trapped atoms, and has important applications in quantum information and quantum computing. Using quantum teleportation could, in principle, allow for all the information about larger objects, perhaps even on the scale of a person, to be teleported to another location. However, there are some major caveats. First, the amount of information needed to completely describe a person is staggering, and most likely already nixes this notion. There are more than 10 to the power of 27 atoms in the average person, each with a position, interactions with other atoms, etc. Second, quantum teleportation only transmits the information, not the atoms themselves, which means you'd need a bunch of atoms at the receiving end to reconstruct the person, and, of course, some way to controllably assemble all these atoms. Third, the quantum teleportation protocol destroys the information at the receiving end. Ouch! And finally, since the protocol requires some regular classical communication to properly decode the information received through quantum teleportation, all this transfer is limited to be less than the speed of light. So quantum teleportation probably will never be used to teleport humans. While it may not be strictly prohibited, it would be very, very hard and perhaps very messy. Bearing all this in mind, and with the scientist of Dr. Olmschenk's standing explaining just how much teleportation is still in its infancy and may never develop beyond that, it is close to impossible to see how it could happen. And this is only on particles, certainly not on something the size of a warship. So the Philadelphia experiment remains an interesting, if impossibly unlikely, tale. That's it for this video. Thanks for watching the Weird Science channel. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe.